In November of 1842, Richmond auctioneer Nathaniel Craven made an announcement that froze the entire Virginia slave market into silence. He was placing one woman, a veiled, silent 23-year-old enslaved woman named Amara, for sale at an opening bid of $14,000, a price so outrageous that even the richest planters believed they had misheard him. Witnesses later swore the moment she stepped onto the platform, the temperature inside the hall seemed to drop. Her wrists were shackled, her hair hidden beneath a dark silk veil, and beneath torn fabric across her back were 7 carved symbols, burned and cut into her skin in patterns no one present could identify. When she lifted her head, dozens of men, overseers, traders, politicians, claimed they felt for a single second as if she recognized every one of them. Only 3 men dared place a bid. By the end of the month, 2 of them would be dead, and the third would vanish before Christmas, leaving behind a blood-stained ledger and a set of letters that were quietly destroyed by state officials. Richmond's elite whispered theories: witchcraft, foreign cults, illegal breeding experiments, escaped mountain tribes. But they had no idea the truth was far darker than anything printed in their newspapers. Because by the spring of 1843, an entire county would burn, 4 plantations would be left abandoned, and every surviving witness would swear, trembling years later, that Amara had not been human in the way they understood humanity. What really happened inside that auction hall? What secret was this woman carrying that terrified every man who tried to claim her? And what did she do in the weeks that followed that forced Virginia's most powerful families to erase her from every record? Before we uncover the disturbing truth, subscribe, hit that bell, and comment your state below. Now, let me take you back to where it all began. Richmond smelled of cold iron that November morning. Iron from the blacksmith's forges, iron from the chains clinking against wagon rails, and iron from the sky itself, heavy with a storm that refused to fall. The slave market on Wall Street was already crowded long before sunrise. Lanterns flickered in the damp air, casting trembling halos over the wooden platforms where men and women waited, silent, bundled in coarse blankets that did nothing against the bitter wind. The crowd murmured with the low, greedy hum that always thickened before a major sale. But today that hum had a nervous edge. Everyone had heard the rumors. Everyone had heard that Nathaniel Craven, a man who measured his own worth in the precision of his coin scales, was preparing to auction something extraordinary. Something never before offered in Virginia, as one planter had whispered to another. Something, or someone, worth more than entire fields of cotton. Nathaniel himself moved through the crowd with the brisk confidence of a man who had never lost a gamble. His tall, thin frame cut a sharp line through the fog, and the glint in his pale gray eyes was the only warmth on his face. He carried a leather ledger under his arm, but inside that ledger was nothing helpful. No names of previous owners. No chain of custody. No plantation of origin. For the first time in his career, Nathaniel possessed something he could not explain. What he did not know, what he would never know, was that half the men in front of him would remember this day for the rest of their lives, and not one of them would ever agree on what they had actually witnessed. The door to the holding chamber creaked open. The sound alone quieted the market. 2 guards stepped out first, their hands wrapped tightly around iron chains. Then came the woman. Slow, steady, silent, Amara. Her feet were bare against the cold planks, but she did not flinch. The thin, dark veil covering her hair fluttered in the wind, and though the cloth obscured most of her features, even a glance at her posture made the crowd tense. She did not cower. She did not tremble. She did not look beaten down in the way auction women were supposed to look. Instead, she lifted her head. Conversation died instantly. Even the horses in the street threw their heads and snorted, unsettled. Nathaniel forced a smile as he stepped forward. "Gentlemen," he announced, "you are witnessing the rarest offering ever presented in Richmond. A woman of exceptional value, unmatched beauty, and excellent health. We will begin the bidding shortly." He expected the usual stirred excitement. Instead, the men stared, not at him but at Amara. One of the guards shifted nervously. "Sir," he whispered, "she ain't said a word. Not since we brought her in." Nathaniel frowned. "She speaks English?" "She speaks fine. Just won't talk." Nathaniel approached her, lowering his voice. "You understand that cooperation serves you far better than defiance." Amara's eyes moved, slowly, deliberately, until they locked with his. "You do not want me." The guard stumbled back. Nathaniel felt his throat tighten. Her voice was gentle, almost melodic, yet something inside it carried a weight he could not place. Before he could respond, a gust of wind caught the edge of her torn dress, lifting the fabric just enough to reveal the skin along her spine. Gasps rippled through the platform. 7 symbols, burned, carved, branded, formed a pattern across her back. Not letters. Not whip marks. Something else. Something too precise, too symmetrical. Even the most hardened traders stepped away. A man in the crowd whispered, "What in God's name?" Another muttered, "Those markings, those ain't natural." None of them knew the truth. Not yet. Above them, on the second-floor balcony of a boarding house overlooking the market, a man concealed beneath a cloak leaned forward, watching. His hand tightened on the brass railing. When Amara turned, her gaze flicked upward, briefly, but enough to make him retreat into the shadows. Nathaniel cleared his throat sharply. Enough. Position her for inspection. The guards hesitated. Neither wanted to touch her. When they finally guided her to the platform, she stepped onto it without resistance. A few flakes of early snow drifted down, catching on her veil, melting instantly on her skin. The silence deepened until even the creaking signs in the street seemed to hold their breath. Nathaniel forced composure into his voice. Opening bid, $14,000. The crowd erupted, not in excitement but outrage. 14,000? Has he lost his senses? No woman is worth that. But then, through the noise, a single voice called out, 14,500. Heads turned toward Colonel Thaddeus Blythe, a broad man with a reputation for cruelty and an ego to match. His eyes were fixed on Amara with a hunger that made Nathaniel uneasy. A second voice followed, 15,000. Dr. Edwin Harrow, the physician, the one rumored to dissect bodies in his basement. Then a third voice, steady, reserved, 16. Silas Pembroke, wealthy, grieving widower. The only man in the crowd who didn't look afraid of her. As the bidding escalated, Amara stood perfectly still, her eyes drifting over the crowd as if she were memorizing faces, weighing sins, counting secrets. What none of those men realized, not Nathaniel, not the bidders, not the watching stranger in the shadows, was that the auction had already sealed their fates. Because by the time the final bid was declared, every man who tried to claim her would be dead, ruined, or lost to history. And this was only the beginning. The bidding ended faster than anyone expected. $16,000. A number that would have been unthinkable for any woman, free or enslaved, yet Silas Pembroke offered it with the quiet ease of a man signing his own death sentence. Nathaniel announced the sale with triumph, though the tremor in his voice betrayed him. Men whispered behind gloved hands. Women peered from carriage windows, trying to glimpse the woman who had just become the most expensive slave in Virginia's history. Amara didn't look at Silas. She didn't look at anyone. Her eyes drifted toward the sky, watching as dark clouds gathered over the market like thick, rolling smoke. Nathaniel snapped his ledger shut and motioned for the guards. "Take her inside. Pembroke will sign the transfer papers in private." The guards reached for her chains. One touched her wrist and jerked back instantly. "She's freezing," he whispered. "Sir, she feels like stone." Nathaniel ignored him. "Move." Amara followed their pull, though her posture remained dignified, almost regal. As they guided her through the wooden doors of the auction house, a cold draft swept through the market, rattling shutters and extinguishing 2 lanterns. Men muttered prayers under their breath. Silas watched her disappear into the shadows of the corridor. He didn't smile. He simply exhaled as though bracing himself for something inevitable. What he did not yet know was that the ledger awaiting his signature held only half the truth, and the other half was watching from the balcony above. The cloaked man stepped back from the railing, breath visible in the cold air. His eyes narrowed. "She should not be here," he murmured. Footsteps approached behind him. Another figure, a shorter, broad-shouldered man carrying a satchel, stepped out of the stairwell. "Well?" the second man asked. "Is it her?" The cloaked man nodded once. "Then we cannot let the sale go through." "We no longer control that," the cloaked man replied. "They have claimed her." The second man spat on the floorboards. "Then we take her back before she ruins everything." The cloaked man's expression darkened. "If you touch her, you will die before you reach the door." Downstairs, Nathaniel escorted Silas into a cramped office that smelled of ink, whiskey, and desperation. The walls were lined with certificates, bills of sale, and paintings meant to impress wealthy buyers. But the largest piece, a framed map of Virginia's plantations, drew Silas's attention. "Strange morning, Mr. Pembroke," Nathaniel attempted lightly. "You have quite the eye." Silas didn't reply. Instead, he scanned the document Nathaniel slid toward him. But something bothered him. "There is no origin," Silas said quietly. "No shipment record. No estate name. Nathaniel's jaw tightened. The seller prefers discretion. Discretion is a luxury, Silas answered. Paperwork is law. Nathaniel exhaled. She is difficult to trace. Silas's eyes lifted. Meaning? Meaning, Nathaniel said slowly, that she arrived without papers. Without escort. Without explanation. She was delivered to me with her hands bound and her back marked like that. The man who brought her refused to give his name, paid me $200 in advance, and vanished. Silas folded the paper. You accepted her? She was valuable. Silas's voice went cold. Or dangerous. Nathaniel bristled. Caretakers and guards have tried questioning her. She barely speaks. She spoke to me. Nathaniel blinked. What did she say? You do not want me. For the first time that morning, Nathaniel looked genuinely unsettled. He poured himself whiskey he did not need. Ignore it. She is playing some kind of... Silas cut him off. And the marks on her back? Nathaniel hesitated. His hand tightened around the glass. Some say they're symbols. Some say scars. Others think it's something older. Some kind of ritual. Do you believe that? Nathaniel avoided the question. All I know is that she fetches a price that will settle my debts. Whatever she is, whoever she is, I am no longer involved. But he was lying. Silas could sense it. Upstairs, guards tried securing Amara in the holding cell, but she stood at the center of the room, silently observing the wooden walls, the metal latch, the candle flickering on a nearby stool. You will not keep me long, she said softly. One guard shifted nervously. We're just doing our job, miss. You should leave before the storm begins. What storm? It's barely. A thunderclap shook the windows. He stumbled back. How did you? She lifted her head. For a moment, her eyes glowed in the dim light, not with supernatural power, but with an ancient, exhausted grief. Because storms follow those who refuse to remain buried. Downstairs, Silas signed the transfer paper. In that instant, the temperature inside the building dropped so sharply every candle danced. Nathaniel's breath misted. Somewhere in the rafters, a low creak echoed. Silas turned toward the corridor and felt a presence watching him. Not Amara. Not Nathaniel. Something else. Something older than the building itself. Outside, snow finally began to fall. What none of them understood was that the moment Silas Pembroke walked toward the holding chamber, the past he thought he had buried began to claw its way back into the world, dragging behind it secrets powerful enough to destroy them all. The snow thickened as the crowd dispersed, softening the filth of the street, muting the rattle of wagon wheels and iron shoes. Richmond looked almost gentle beneath its white veil, but inside the men who had bid on Amara, something sharp and restless had begun to stir. Colonel Thaddeus Blythe reached his carriage in a fury. His driver had barely climbed down when Blythe snapped, I will walk. Take the team to the stable. Yes, sir. Blythe strode through the slush, boots biting into the half-frozen mud, jaw clenched so hard it hurt. 16,000. Outmaneuvered. By Silas Pembroke of all men, a plantation owner who treated grief like a cloak he refused to take off. Pembroke, Blythe muttered, the name sour on his tongue. Weak-spined hypocrite. He turned into a quieter street, past brick houses with glowing windows. Behind those panes, wives and daughters pretended not to know what business had called their husbands into town. Blythe snorted. Liars. All of them. He reached a side alley and stopped, breath clouding the air. A man stepped out of the shadows, a nervous fellow with ink-stained fingers and a ledger tucked beneath his arm. You saw it? Blythe demanded. The man swallowed. Everyone saw it, Colonel. The marks on her back. Not the marks, Blythe snapped. Her face. The man hesitated. She looked familiar, sir. Not to me. But you. It is impossible, Blythe whispered. And yet. He saw another face overlaid upon hers. Younger. Laughing. Standing beneath an oak tree on his own land, sunlight in her hair and defiance in her eyes. An enslaved girl who had dared to say no to him. Dared to run. Dared to disappear 15 years earlier without a trace. The one rumor he had never stamped out as thoroughly as he thought. What if it is her blood? The man ventured. A daughter? A sister? Blythe's hand shot out and seized the front of the man's coat. She knows something, he hissed. Whether she is the one I lost or someone who crossed paths with her, she knows. And I will not have that knowledge in another man's possession. You mean Pembroke? Blythe released him with a shove. Find out where Pembroke is lodging tonight. I want to know which road he takes back to his estate. I want to know how many men he travels with. And I want it before the church bells ring 6. The man nodded frantically. Yes, Colonel. Right away. Blythe watched him scurry away, then looked up at the darkening sky. You will not ruin me, he whispered to ghosts only he could see. Not again. Meanwhile, in a boarding house 2 streets away, Dr. Edwin Harrow sat at a small desk, staring at a glass jar half filled with cloudy alcohol. Suspended inside it was a shriveled organ from a long-forgotten dissection, labeled in his own neat handwriting. The woman from the auction hovered in his thoughts like a fever he could not break. He had seen scars before. Whip marks, burn marks, brands. But nothing like the symbols on her back. They were too deliberate, too even. Not random cruelty but inscription. He opened a notebook, its pages filled with sketches and notes, secrets that would have ended his career if any respectable society ever laid eyes on them. Experiments, observations, theories whispered in medical circles, never admitted in daylight. He dipped his pen. 7 symbols, he wrote, arranged in 2 vertical columns with 1 central mark bridging them. Not Latin, not Greek, not any common cipher. He added a rough sketch from memory, hand moving quickly. What are you? He whispered. Only Harrow, among the 3 bidders, had seen her eyes change when Nathaniel announced the opening bid. To the others it had looked like fear or resignation. But Harrow had noticed something else. Calculation. Assessment. As though she were measuring the men in the room, not the other way around. He leaned back in his chair and closed his eyes. A woman with no papers. Delivered by an unnamed man. Marked like a diagram. Sold for a sum that makes no sense. And not one detail of her body suggests fragility. His mind turned to rumors he had collected over the years. Stories of a secret gathering someplace in the Virginia countryside. Of white men meeting in locked rooms to discuss improvements to bloodlines, as if flesh were nothing more than stock to be crossbred. He had dismissed those tales as exaggerations. But now, no, he murmured. They would not have given up such an asset willingly, unless she escaped them. The idea thrilled and unsettled him in equal measure. He rose abruptly, chair scraping. He would not sleep. He could not. He needed to see those marks again up close. He needed to test her reactions, her pulse, her pupils. He needed to know whether what he had just purchased with his failed bid, doubt, curiosity, obsession, would eat him alive. I will go to Pembroke's estate, he decided aloud, on the guise of a medical courtesy. A consultation. He will not refuse me. Not once the trouble begins. Because Dr. Edwin Harrow knew something the others did not. Bodies told stories even when mouths refused to speak. And he had no intention of letting a specimen like Amara vanish into countryside obscurity. As for Silas Pembroke, he sat alone in the private parlor of a respectable inn, a fire burning low in the grate. The transfer papers lay on the table before him, edges curling where his fingers had pressed them too hard. He stared at his own signature as if it belonged to someone else. What have you done? He whispered. He had sworn, after his wife Elizabeth died, that he would never again purchase another enslaved person for his household. The guilt of past years had carved itself into his bones. He had begun, slowly, cautiously, to draft manumission papers. Not for everyone. Not yet. But for a few. And then he had seen Amara. He couldn't explain it. It wasn't lust. Her face had been half hidden. It wasn't cruelty. He recoiled from the very thought. It was something else. A pull that felt uncomfortably like recognition. You do not want me. The memory of her voice lingered, haunting. He poured a measure of brandy and didn't drink it. His reflection wavered in the darkened window, a man not yet 40 who looked older every time he bothered to notice. Elizabeth, he murmured, you would despise this. But beneath the shame was another truth he could not name. He believed somehow that his life could not continue along its quiet, rotting path. Something had to break. And when he saw Amara on that platform, he understood, without understanding why, that his quiet life was already over. By midnight he would begin to suspect just how right he was. Because as the fire crackled and the snow fell thicker outside, a rider passed the inn without stopping, his cloak drawn tight around his face, his destination fixed on the inn stables. He had been paid to follow Silas Pembroke. He had been paid to wait. And he was not the only man riding that night. What Silas did not yet know was that by dawn, the road to Pembroke Plantation would become a hunting ground, and the woman he had just purchased would be the bait, the prize, and the executioner all at once. The storm rolled in faster than the men preparing the stables expected. Heavy snow gave way to sleet, then to sharp pellets that stung exposed skin like shattered glass. By the time Silas Pembroke stepped out of the inn with Amara's transfer papers tucked inside his coat, the street lamps flickered under the force of the wind. He pulled his collar high, tightening his cloak. "We leave before the roads freeze over," he told his driver. "Yes, sir." "Wagon's ready." Silas hesitated at the stable door. He could feel something wrong in the air, something colder than the storm, something deeper than winter. He shook it off and stepped inside. Amara stood in the corner. No one had brought her there. No guard had escorted her. Yet there she was, staring at the horse's breath fogging the cold air. She had no cloak, no shoes. Snow clung to the hem of her torn dress like white ash. Silas froze. "How did you?" "I was told you were in the holding room." "I was," she replied calmly, "until I chose not to be." A stable hand made the sign of the cross and fled. Silas approached her cautiously. "You cannot walk in this storm dressed like that. You will freeze." "I do not freeze." She turned her head toward him. "And you should not stand so close to the door." "Why?" The door burst open. Two masked riders lunged through the entrance, boots slamming against the wood, snow scattering across the floor. Both carried pistols. Both aimed at Silas. "Move aside," one hissed. "Hand over the woman." Silas stepped back, shock tightening his chest. "Who are you? What do you?" "Do not speak," the second man snapped. "Do not argue. Just move." Amara didn't move at all. Her eyes fixed on the riders, unblinking. Silas raised his hands slowly. "You have no right." "We have every right," the first man growled. "She belongs to men far more powerful than you. Men who built everything you walk on." Silas felt a chill in his spine, deeper than the cold. That phrasing. That certainty. As though this was not theft but retrieval. Amara tilted her head. "You should not do this." The second rider barked a laugh. "She speaks." The first nudged his partner. "Grab her and tie the master. If he resists, kill him." Silas stepped forward. "You will not touch." He didn't finish. The lantern hanging from the stable beam shattered. Not from wind. Not from impact. From something unseen. Glass rained down in glittering pieces. The horses reared, screaming, hooves smashing against the wooden stalls. The masked riders flinched, guns wavering for a heartbeat. That heartbeat was enough. Amara moved. Silas never fully saw it, only the blur of her shifting sideways, the way her hands twisted the chain around her wrists, snapping one link free with a metallic crack that should have been impossible. She struck the first rider's wrist. His pistol flew from his hand and skidded across the straw-covered floor. The second rider fired wildly, the gunshot deafening inside the enclosed space. Silas ducked. The bullet hit a support beam, splintering wood. Amara stepped behind the second rider before he realized she'd moved. Her chain wrapped around his arm, pulled tight, and with a single jerk she sent him crashing into the stall door. He hit the ground choking for air. The first rider scrambled backward. "Demon?" Amara stood over him, the broken shackle dangling from her wrist like a threat forged in steel. "I warned you," she said quietly. He fired. Point blank. Straight into her chest. The gunshot echoed. Silas shouted her name even though he did not understand why. When the smoke drifted, she was still standing, breathing. The bullet lay flattened on the floorboards at her feet. The rider's eyes widened in horror. Silas stared, unable to speak. Amara stepped toward him. "You will not harm him," she said, nodding toward Silas. "Leave. Or die here." The rider scrambled to his knees, kicking straw as he fled out the stable door into the storm. His partner crawled after him, clutching his ribs. Silas stood motionless. Wind howled through the broken window. Light flickered from the single remaining lantern. The horses trembled, sweating in the cold. Amara turned to him slowly, her expression unreadable. "More will come." Silas swallowed. "Who are they?" "The ones who carved these," she answered, touching her back. "The ones who believe they own me. The ones who know what I carry." "And what do you carry?" He whispered the question. She stepped closer, her voice soft but heavy. "A truth they will kill to bury." Silas's breath fogged the air between them. "Why me? Why let me take you?" Her eyes met his. For the first time, something like sorrow flickered there. "Because you were not chosen. You stepped into a path meant for others. And that means?" "It means," she said, "you are already part of the story you fear." Another blast of wind slammed the stable doors. She looked toward it and whispered, "We must leave now." Silas nodded, shaken but resolute. Then we leave. What he did not know was that this was the safest moment he would experience for weeks. Because the storm was not their enemy. The men hunting them were. And they were already waiting on the road. The road to Pembroke Plantation wound like a black vein through the winter-bleached countryside. Bare trees clawed at the sky, their branches etched against the low, pewter-colored ceiling of clouds. The storm had eased into a fine, icy drizzle by the time Silas's wagon left Richmond, but the air remained sharp enough to cut. Inside the wagon, a single lantern swung gently from a hook, throwing moving circles of light over the wooden walls. Amara sat opposite Silas, her hands still bound by the half-broken chain. Someone had thrown a woolen cloak over her shoulders. She hadn't asked for it, but she hadn't removed it either. Silas watched her closely. Every time the wheel struck a rut, the lantern light swept over her face, revealing a calm that bordered on unnerving. "You should rest," he said finally. "I do not rest on roads," she answered. "Roads are where men vanish." The driver's muffled voice drifted from outside. "Rough patch up ahead, sir. We'll need to slow." Silas raised his voice. "Do it." He turned back to Amara. "Those men in the stable, do you know them?" "Not by their faces." She looked at the lantern flame. "But I know who sent them. You said they carved the marks on your back." "They carved them," she replied, "but they did not design them. Men like that are hands, not minds." "Then whose design is it?" She met his gaze. For a moment he saw the weight of years in her eyes, years she should not have had. She was too young to look that old. "Have you heard," she asked quietly, "of men who meet in secret houses with no windows? Men who speak of flesh as if it were grain? Of women as if they were breeding stock for horses?" Silas felt a coldness that had nothing to do with the weather. "Rumors," he said. "Whispers. Tales told to make other men seem worse than they already are. They are not tales." "How do you know?" "Because," she said, "I was chained in one of those houses." The wagon jolted. Silas grabbed the side rail to steady himself. "Where?" "In Virginia. Not far from where your plantation lies." He stared, disbelief fighting with the quiet certainty in her tone. "You expect me to believe that a secret society of that kind exists beneath our noses, and no one has exposed it?" "They are the ones who write the laws," she said. "They choose who goes to prison and who goes to church. They decide which rumors die and which are printed. And you?" His voice grew hoarse. "What were you to them?" A shadow crossed her face. "A mistake." Silas frowned. "How can a woman be a mistake?" "When men plan evil," she said, "they count on fear and silence. They do not plan for someone who survives. They do not plan for someone who remembers everything." The wagon slowed suddenly. Silas felt the shift and looked toward the small shuttered window. The road outside had narrowed, hemmed in by dense trees folding overhead like a tunnel. "Driver?" Silas called. "Yes, sir." The reply came back tight. "There's something in the road." "What kind of something?" Pause. "Tree branch, maybe. Or something else. Hard to see in this light." Silas felt the prickle of warning crawl up his neck. "Stay inside," he told Amara. She gave him a look that said she would do no such thing. He pushed the wagon door open anyway and stepped down into the cold, wet air. The forest swallowed sound, leaving only the drip of freezing water from the branches. He walked ahead. The driver stood near the team, lantern raised. The horses stamped nervously, their eyes rolling white. "There," the driver said, pointing. Across the road lay a fallen limb, thick enough to block the way. But Silas's attention went not to the branch, but to the ground beside it. Tracks. Not horse tracks. Not wagon wheels. Feet. Men at least 4, maybe more, judging by the churned mud. "They were waiting," Silas muttered. "For what?" the driver whispered. "To stop us." Behind them the wagon door creaked. Amara stepped down into the road, cloak trailing behind her. The cold mud soaked her bare feet, but she didn't flinch. "Get back inside," Silas snapped. "They are already here," she said. The driver swung the lantern in a slow arc, fear tightening his jaw. "I do not see." The gunshot came from the trees. The lantern exploded in his hand. He screamed, falling backward as flaming oil splattered into the mud and hissed out. The horses bolted, straining against their harnesses, whinnying in blind panic. "Down?" Silas yelled. He tackled Amara, pulling her toward the ditch just as a second shot ricocheted off the wagon wheel. They hit the cold ground together. The smell of wet earth and gunpowder filled his lungs. Voices rose in the dark. "Stay where you are." Do not let the woman run. Kill the driver if he moves. For shadows emerged from the trees, each cloaked, each armed. Their faces were covered with kerchiefs. One held a rope. Another a chain with open shackles at the end. Silas pushed himself up, rage and fear colliding inside him. You will not take her, he said. One of the men laughed. You think this is about you, Pembroke? You are a temporary inconvenience. She belongs to men greater than you. Amara stood up slowly beside him, ignoring the mud soaked into her dress. If they are greater, she said, why do they hide in trees like thieves? The nearest man aimed his pistol at her. You will be silent. No, she answered. I will not. Silas stepped in front of her without thinking, arms spread. You want her, you will have to go through me. You overestimate your value, another man drawled. What he does not understand, Amara murmured, is that there are worse things hunting him than bullets. The men shifted uneasily. Enough of this, the leader snapped. Take her. He didn't finish. From somewhere deeper in the forest, a long, low howl echoed. Not animal. Not entirely human. It threaded through the trees like a sound that had no business in Virginia at all. The men froze. The horses fought their harnesses harder. The driver whimpered, clutching his burned hand. Silas swallowed hard. What was that? Amara's eyes darkened. Old debts, she said. And older promises. The leader recovered first. Superstitious nonsense. Spread out. If she runs, shoot her legs. They took a step forward in unison. The earth trembled. It was slight, almost imperceptible, but enough to send tiny avalanches of sleet sliding from the branches. One man slipped and cursed. Another looked over his shoulder as if expecting the ground to open. Do you feel it? Amara asked quietly. Silas did. A pulse under his feet. A heartbeat that was not his own, thrumming through soil and root. This land remembers me, she said. It remembers what was done on it. And it remembers who bled. Lightning flashed without thunder, illuminating the men's faces, pale and drawn. For just a second, in that flickering light, they saw the scars on her back glow faintly, the carved symbols outlined in something that looked too much like fire. Then the light vanished, plunging the road back into darkness. None of them knew it yet, but the road to Pembroke Plantation had just become a line drawn in blood between the past and the present. And not all of them would live to reach the gates. For a heartbeat after the lightning faded, no one moved. The men on the road could still see the afterimage of her back burned into their vision. The pattern of scars lit as if by embers, the suggestion of fire running along flesh long since healed. Reason told them it had been a trick of the light. Instinct whispered otherwise. What, did you see that? One of them breathed. Shut up, the leader snapped, though his own voice shook. It was nothing. She is nothing. Take her. He lifted his pistol again. The earth pulsed underfoot. This time it was stronger. Enough to rattle the wagon, to send the horses bucking in outright terror. One snapped its traces and bolted, tearing the harness, hooves pounding into the mud as it fled down the road. The wagon listed sideways with a groan of wood and metal. Silas grabbed for the nearest branch to steady himself. Beside him, Amara stood as if rooted. Last chance, she said to the men. Leave this road. You do not give orders here, the leader snarled. He fired. The shot went wild. Not because his aim was poor, but because the ground lurched again, sudden and sharp. His footing slid, his pistol arm jerked sideways, and the ball shattered harmlessly against a rock a yard from Silas's head. Another man lunged forward, swinging the open shackles like a club. Silas tried to intercept him and took the blow along his shoulder. Pain flared white-hot. He stumbled, half falling. The man stepped past him, reaching for Amara's throat. She moved like a shadow breaking free from itself. Her hand caught his wrist. There was a crack, short, dry, decisive. His scream tore through the trees. The shackles dropped from fingers no longer obeying him. He fell to his knees, clutching his arm. You were warned, she said. The leader roared and charged, abandoning distance, heedless of strategy. Two others followed, drawn more by rage and fear than duty. For a moment, the road dissolved into chaos. Mud churning, branches snapping, curses flying. Silas forced himself upright despite the throbbing in his shoulder. He saw one of the men raise a knife behind Amara's back. Look out, he shouted. She didn't turn. She simply stepped sideways, letting the man's momentum carry him past her, his knife arm overextended. Silas met him with the only weapon he had, his own full weight in a desperate tackle. They went down together. The knife flew into the ditch. The leader swung at Amara's face. She caught his fist with both hands, stopping it inches from her skin. Their eyes locked. "You belong to us," he hissed through clenched teeth. "You were made for us." "No," she replied softly. "I was broken by you." "That is not the same thing." His strength faltered. For the first time, he seemed to realize she hadn't been straining against him at all, that she had allowed him to think he was close to overpowering her. His eyes widened with that knowledge. The third man tried to rush her from behind. The earth answered first. The road under his feet gave way, not a full collapse, not a pit, but a sudden slide of mud and stone. His legs flew out from under him. He hit the ground hard, head striking a hidden root with a dull thud. He didn't get up. The leader saw it. Panic finally broke through his stubbornness. "This place is cursed," one of the men gasped. Amara released the leader's hand. "No, this place is remembering." He staggered back, clutching his bruised knuckles. His gaze darted between the unconscious man on the ground, his whimpering companion with a broken wrist, Silas bleeding from a cut he hadn't noticed, and the woman standing calm in the center of it all. "Fall back," he snapped. "We regroup. We were not told." He cut himself off. But Silas heard enough. Not told what? The leader gave Amara a final look, less hatred now, more calculation, and jerked his head toward the trees. The uninjured man hauled the broken wrist one to his feet, half dragging him. With a last, fearful glance, they vanished into the forest, leaving the unconscious man behind. Silas stared after them, chest heaving. "They're just going to leave him?" "He chose his path," Amara said. "The forest has chosen his price." Silas wiped blood from his brow with a shaking hand. "Who are they? Who commands them?" "The same men who sat over me in a windowless room," she said. "The ones who argued whether I would be more profitable as an experiment or as an example. The ones who use men like that as dogs." He looked down at the unconscious attacker. Even in the dim light, he could see a faint brand near the man's collarbone, nothing like plantation marks. Something more intricate. It mirrored, in crude form, one of the symbols on Amara's back. Silas felt the cold sink deeper. "We cannot stay here," he said quietly. "They will come back with more." "Yes," she agreed. "They will." He turned to his driver, who sat against the wagon wheel, cradling his burned hand. "Can you still handle the team?" The man grimaced. "If the beast will obey, sir. I can manage." "Then we move. Now." It took nearly half an hour to calm the remaining horse, right the wagon, and bind Silas's shoulder with a torn strip of his own shirt. The unconscious attacker was dragged to the side of the road and left against a tree. Silas did not delude himself into calling it mercy. It was necessity. They had no room, no time, and too many enemies. As they climbed back into the wagon, Silas noticed that Amara's bare feet were streaked with blood that was not hers. She did not seem to feel it. "You saved my life," he said, settling opposite her once more. "I saved the part of your life that still has work to do," she answered. He frowned. "Work? You think this ends with you dropping me in your fields?" There was no mockery in her voice, only a tired certainty. "Your name has now crossed theirs. They do not forget those who interfere." Silas stared at the lantern flame, watching it sway. "I did not intend to interfere in anything. I only—" He stopped. "Only what?" she asked. He shook his head. "I do not know. I saw you on that platform and something in me refused to let you go to men like Blythe or Harrow. It felt like a debt. One I did not remember incurring." Her gaze softened just slightly. "Sometimes the soul remembers what the mind refuses to see." The wagon lurched forward, carrying them deeper into the dark. Hours later, just before dawn bled thin gray into the sky, the first outline of Pembroke Plantation appeared between the trees, its main house a white specter against the horizon, columns rising from mist, chimneys smoking faintly. To anyone standing on the veranda, it would have looked like any other Virginia estate, quiet and proper in the morning chill. But the land felt different beneath Amara's feet when she stepped down from the wagon at the gates. Older. Wearier. "This place," she murmured, "has seen its share of blood." Silas glanced at her, startled. "You have never been here." "I do not need to see a place to know what it remembers," she said. "The earth speaks in weight. In scars." He swallowed. "Then listen closely. Because whatever secrets this land holds, I fear they are about to wake." None of them knew that inside the house, a visitor had already arrived. A man in a dark coat sat warming his hands by the library fire, a medical bag at his feet, his eyes curious and hungry. Dr. Edwin Harrow had beaten them there by an hour. and he was very interested in meeting Silas Pembroke's new purchase. The front doors of Pembroke Plantation groaned open as Silas stepped inside, stomping mud from his boots. A quiet unease clung to him, not simply from the attack on the road, nor from the strange pulse he had felt beneath the earth, but from the heavy stillness inside his own home. The parlor lamps were lit, the fire warm, but the air felt wrong. Wash. He wiped sleet from his coat and called out, "Judah? Martha? Anyone awake?" Footsteps approached from the hall. Judah, his oldest house servant, appeared, his expression both relieved and wary. "Sir, thank the Lord you're home. There's a man waitin' for you." Silas stiffened. "A man?" "In the library, sir. Says he's a doctor. Came just before sunup." Silas closed his eyes. "Of course, Arrow." Judah continued, "Beggin' your pardon, sir, but somethin' about him ain't right. He's polite enough, but—" Judah lowered his voice. "He kept his skin, if you'd brought anyone back with you." Silas glanced over his shoulder. Amara had stepped silently into the foyer, the faint heat from the fireplace glinting along the marks on her back as she adjusted her cloak. She examined the high ceilings, the carved banister, the portraits along the wall, faces of people long dead, their eyes quietly accusing. "This house has known grief," she murmured. Silas's pulse tightened. "We will speak of that later. For now, stay behind me." She didn't argue, but she watched the hallway ahead as someone might watch a field full of hidden traps. Silas moved into the library. Dr. Edwin Harrow stood near the fire, turning a glass slowly in his hand. His sharp features caught the glow of the flame, cheekbones like carved marble, eyes too bright for a normal man. He smiled as Silas entered. "Pembroke, you look as though you survived a blizzard." "In a manner of speaking," Silas replied. "What are you doing here?" Harrow set the glass down. "Concern. Curiosity. Professional responsibility." His gaze slid toward the door where Amara's silhouette hovered. "And I see my concerns were justified." Silas stepped fully between them. "You have no right to enter my home uninvited." "Then forgive me." Harrow offered a small bow. "But when a subject, pardon, a woman, with such unusual markings passes through this county, I consider it my duty as a physician to ensure her well-being." Amara stepped forward. "You are not here for my well-being," she said. Harrow's eyes flickered with interest. "You speak with more fluency than the auctioneer suggested." "I speak when I choose." Silas cut in sharply. "Doctor, state your true purpose." "My purpose," Harrow replied, "is to examine her." "Denied." Harrow's smile widened. "I expected you to say that. But Pembroke, you do not understand who hunts her. Nor do you understand the danger you have invited into your home." Silas tensed. "And you do." "Oh, I know more than you imagine." Harrow clasped his hands behind his back as if delivering a lecture. "There is a group, less a society, more an arrangement, of men who believe human anatomy holds potential beyond what God intended. They have met for years. Quietly. Successfully." His gaze lingered on Amara. "And recently, they acquired a subject unlike any they had encountered." Amara's voice rang soft but iron-hard. "You call it acquisition. I call it abduction." Harrow's jaw flexed. "Semantics." Silas stepped forward. "What do they want with her?" "To push boundaries," Harrow said simply. "To reshape the limitations of the flesh. They attempted things on her that would have killed anyone else." Silas felt his world tilt. "Such as?" Harrow's eyes gleamed. "Blood manipulation. Sensory deprivation designed to heighten neurological response. Pain thresholds measured beyond natural limits. And other methods." He trailed off, watching Silas closely. "Methods you would consider barbaric." Silas's voice cracked. "And she lived through that?" "She did more than live," Harrow said. "She adapted, changed, survived in ways that confounded them." Amara's gaze did not waver. "I survived because they lacked the skill to break me." Harrow's fascination deepened. "Precisely why I came. Those men of influence, men who wield the law like a scalpel, will not stop until they have her back." "Then why warn us?" Silas demanded. "You could simply hand her over." "Oh, I intend to," Harrow said quietly. "But not yet." Silas stiffened. "Explain." Harrow moved closer to the fire, staring into the flames. "Before they take her, I intend to finish the work they began." Amara's expression darkened. "You will not touch me." Harrow's smile turned cruel. "You misunderstand. I do not need to touch you. All I require is 1 hour alone. 1 hour to observe. to measure, to test. Nothing invasive, nothing permanent. And when I am done, I will hand you over to them, and they will reward me accordingly. Silas grabbed Harrow by the coat. I should throw you out right now. No, Harrow whispered. You will not. And why would I not? Harrow looked over Silas's shoulder toward the entry hall, because footsteps were approaching. Heavy ones. More than one pair. Muffled voices. The metallic click of weapons being checked. Harrow's expression softened almost kindly. Because, he said, they are already here. Silas released him and spun toward the doorway. Judah burst into the room breathless. Sir, riders comin' down the drive. Armed men. They ain't wearin' patrol badges. Harrow folded his hands behind his back, satisfied. Pembroke, allow me to introduce the men who own her. Amara stepped forward, voice low. They do not own me. No, Harrow said. But they believe they do. And that belief will burn this house to the ground. Silas stared at the doorway, where shadows gathered in the hall and the sound of boots against wood echoed closer. He whispered, What have I brought into my home? Amara answered without looking at him. The truth you never wanted to see. Outside, another knock thundered against the front doors, 3 hard strikes that shook the entryway as if the night itself were demanding entrance. The men from the trees had returned. But this time they had brought reinforcements. And none of them were leaving without blood. The pounding on the front doors grew louder, 3 blows, then a pause, then 3 more. A pattern. A signal. Not desperate knocking but a command. The kind men used when they expected obedience. Silas stared toward the foyer, breath tight. Judah, get Martha and the others out the back. Now. Yes, sir. Judah bolted from the room, terror sharpening his steps. Harrow dusted an invisible speck from his sleeve. You truly believe your staff will escape? They have surrounded the house. Silas turned on him. If they harm anyone here. They will not, Harrow interrupted calmly. They only want her. He tilted his head toward Amara. And they want any evidence that she ever passed through your hands. Preferably erased. Amara stepped into the center of the room. The firelight flickered across her face, revealing the strange calm settling in her eyes. They are afraid. Silas blinked. Afraid? They're armed. Armed men are often the most frightened, she said. Fear makes them obedient. Enough riddles, Silas snapped. Tell me what they want. She turned her head slightly, listening, not with her ears but with something deeper. They want to hide what they did. And they want my body returned to them because it proves their sins. The front door slammed again. A voice called out, cold, authoritative. Silas Pembroke, this is your final courtesy. Open the door and surrender the girl. Silas exchanged a look with Amara. They know my name. They know everything, she replied. Harrow stepped forward. I will negotiate their entry. No, Silas said sharply. You will stay exactly where you are. Harrow smiled faintly. You have no idea what is coming. The front doors burst open. Splinters shot across the foyer as the hinges tore loose. Silas flinched as cold air punched into the house, snow swirling across the polished floor. 5 men entered first, 3 with pistols drawn, 2 carrying lanterns. Behind them came a 6th, unmasked, older, with a trimmed beard and the composed bearing of a judge. He removed his gloves calmly. Pembroke, he greeted. Step aside. Silas didn't move. State your name. The man smiled a predator's smile. I have many. Here I am only what you will obey. His men spread out across the foyer, tightening their formation. Bootsteps echoed up the staircase as others moved to seal the upper hall. Amara stepped into their view. Every man froze. For a breath, the house seemed to swallow sound. The older man exhaled. So she truly survived. One of the lantern carriers whispered, She shouldn't be standing. Amara's voice sliced through the quiet. You burned me. You carved me. You left me for dead. We improved you, the leader corrected smoothly. We elevated you beyond what you were. You call torture improvement? We call it purpose, he said. Silas stepped between them. She is under my protection. The older man's gaze shifted, cold amusement touching his eyes. And who are you to protect her from the men who made her? Silas felt the words like ice down his spine. Made her? She was chosen, the man replied. Selected for trial, refined through suffering, molded into something greater. Amara spoke softly. No. I was selected because you believed no one would miss me. Silas's heart twisted. The older man lifted a hand. The armed men raised their guns. Seize her. Silas reacted before he thought. No. He shoved Amara behind him. 3 guns turned toward his chest. The leader sighed. Do not make this difficult, Pembroke. Step aside and you may keep your life. I won't hand her to you, Silas said. Then your life is forfeit. A standoff tightened the air. The house creaked under the winter wind as if even the walls held their breath. Then, a sound rose from the back of the house. A deep, resonant vibration, almost like a wind rushing through sealed walls, almost like something moving beneath the foundation. Arrow stiffened. What is that? The older man's eyes narrowed. She has awakened something. You awakened it, Amara said. Years ago when you spilled blood on land not meant for you. Silas didn't understand, but he felt the vibration growing. The lantern glass trembled. The older man barked in order. Take her. Now. 2 men lunged. Amara stepped backward, her back touching Silas's chest. Do not fear. I'm not afraid, Silas whispered. You will be, she murmured, but not of them. Before the men could reach her, the house shook. A full, violent tremor rippled through the floorboards, toppling bookshelves and swinging chandeliers. Men staggered, grabbing banisters. The lanterns in the foyer shattered, spilling fire across the floor. Earthquake, one shouted. No, the older man snapped. Virginia has no fault line near here. Another tremor followed, stronger. A painting crashed from the wall. Glass exploded outward. The older man steadied himself. She is manipulating it. I am not, Amara said. You are. The men looked confused, until a deeper realization dawned. The tremors weren't random. They were rhythmic. A pulse. An echo. A memory. The older man paled. No, we buried that circle. Burned it. Salted it. You burned the house, Amara corrected. Not the land. The tremor hit again, hard enough to split a floorboard down the center. One of the men fell to his knees. Sir, we must retreat. The leader lifted his pistol again, voice rising with desperation. Take her. Do not let her leave this house alive. Silas moved to block them. But Amara stepped forward. The scars on her back glowed again, not bright, not supernatural, but faint, like smoldering coals buried beneath ash. I told you, she said softly, this land remembers your sins. The house groaned. The men lunged. The tremor grew into a roar. And as the floor split beneath their feet, no one, not Silas, not Harrow, not the men who came to reclaim her, knew who would fall first, or who the land had already chosen. The floor split with a jagged crack that raced across the library like a bolt of lightning. Wood splintered, shelves toppled, books scattered like startled birds taking flight. 2 armed men nearest the fissure screamed as the floor buckled beneath them. One fell through instantly, vanishing into the dark void below. The other clung to the edge, boots scraping, fingers digging into the broken boards. Help. Help. His commander barely glanced at him. Leave him. Focus on the girl. But Amara wasn't running. She stepped toward the widening fracture as calmly as if approaching a pond. Her voice was quiet, almost mournful. You spilled blood here long before I arrived. You believed the earth had no memory. The trapped man's grip failed. His scream echoed as he slid into the darkness. Silas grabbed a pillar as another tremor shook the foundation. Amara, away from the split. But she remained where she was, eyes fixed on the leader. The older man lifted his pistol with both hands, steadying it despite the shaking. Enough. Enough, girl. You are not powerful. You were an experiment. A subject. We carved you to map reactions. We branded you to measure nerve endurance. You are nothing special. Amara turned slightly, and the firelight caught the edges of her scars. If I was nothing, she said softly, you would not be here with guns and fear. Seize her, he barked. 3 remaining gunmen rushed forward. Silas moved without thinking. He grabbed a chair and hurled it at the nearest attacker. The man dodged, but it slowed him long enough for Silas to land a blow across his jaw. Pain flared in Silas's injured shoulder, but adrenaline drove him. A gunshot exploded behind him. The bullet tore through the wooden pillar inches from his head. He threw himself behind a toppled bookshelf, ducking as another shot splintered wood. The room filled with smoke, dust, and the acrid smell of ignited powder. One gunman lunged for Amara again. She sidestepped with a fluid, unnatural grace. His momentum carried him into the broken floor. He fell face first onto the jagged edge, screaming as he clung to a beam. His pistol clattered and disappeared into the darkness below. Another tremor, This one so violent the chandelier snapped from its chain and crashed into the center of the room, scattering glass in every direction. Dr. Harrow dove behind the piano, cursing. This is impossible. She cannot be doing this. We studied the nerve firings, the sensory responses. She cannot. Amara's gaze snapped toward him and Harrow froze. Your studies were flawed, she said. You never understood what you were forcing awake. The older leader growled. Enough. He lunged toward her, not like a nobleman or officer, but like an animal cornered. He grabbed her cloak, yanking it violently. The garment tore. And for the first time, every man still standing saw her back clearly in the open firelight. 7 symbols. Burned deep. Perfectly symmetrical. Lines crossing lines, circles enclosing triangles, patterns too deliberate to be random. On untouched skin they might have been beautiful. On a human body they were horrific. But what froze the room wasn't the sight of the scars. It was that the symbols were glowing again. Faint, subtle, but real. The leader stumbled back a step, horror dawning. No, we silenced that circle. We ended it. We ended her. You ended nothing, Amara said. Silas forced himself up from his cover, blood running warm down his arm. Amara, what do they mean? Those marks, what do they mean? There was no time for her answer. A final, violent tremor split the floor completely beneath the leader's feet. He stumbled, arms flailing, dropping his pistol. As he fell forward, Amara reached out, not to save him but to steady herself on the fractured beam. Silas thought the leader would plunge into the abyss. He didn't. His fingers found a cracked board. He hung there, panting, face inches from the smoke rising from below. Help me, he rasped at Silas. You must help me. Silas stared at him. You came here to kill us. I can pay you, the man choked. I can protect you. I can erase your debts, your crimes. I have no debts, Silas said coldly. Then do it for your conscience, the leader screamed. Silas hesitated, and the man made his mistake. He looked past Silas, right at Amara. You belong to us, he shrieked. You were made for us. You are property. Amara stepped forward without expression. The leader paled. Stay back. You carved me, she said, so that no one would ever forget what you did. We elevated you. You destroyed me. The beam beneath him cracked. He lunged upward, but the wood split fully. His hand slipped. His eyes widened. No. He fell. The sound of his body hitting bottom came a long moment later. Silas turned to Amara, trembling. What is beneath this house? She looked down into the smoking fissure. A place your ancestors built. A place where they chained men and called it instruction. A place where they carved symbols they did not understand. Harrow crawled out from behind the piano, shaking, eyes wild. This is impossible. This is beyond science. Amara faced him. It is beyond cruelty. That is all. He backed away. The circle will send more. They will not stop, not until they claim you or kill you. Amara's expression didn't change. Then they will die here too. Silas stared at the collapsed floor, at the dead men, at the glowing marks on her back, at the trembling house. His voice was barely a whisper. What are you? She looked at him with ancient sorrow. What you made, she said. And what survived. The entire house groaned, loudly. The structural collapse was no longer a threat. It was a promise. The mansion was coming down. And they had minutes, perhaps seconds, to escape. The groaning of the house deepened into a low, resonant thunder, wood beams crying out under pressure, plaster cracking like brittle ice, portraits trembling on their hooks as dust sifted from the ceiling. The entire structure seemed to inhale, as if preparing to collapse in one final exhalation. Silas grabbed Amara's arm. We must get out, now. She did not resist, but her eyes lingered on the smoking fissure beneath the shattered floorboards. It waits, she murmured. The land remembers every drop they spilled here. Forget the land. Silas snapped. If we stay, the house will kill us all. Another violent tremor shook the walls. A crack shot up one of the support columns, splitting it like a lightning strike. The chandelier chain snapped a second time, sending the heavy frame crashing down inches from Harrow, who shrieked and scrambled backward. Judah's frantic voice echoed from the foyer. Sir, this house ain't gonna hold. Silas pulled Amara toward the hall. Move. Harrow stumbled to his feet, clutching his medical bag. Wait. You cannot leave me. I know things, details, records of the circle. Silas didn't slow. Follow if you want to live. Harrow lurched after them, eyes wild, boots slipping on broken glass. They burst into the foyer just as the staircase shuddered violently. Half the banister tore free, tumbling to the floor with a crash. Snow gusted through the open front doors. The armed men who had entered with their leader lay scattered, one unconscious, one dead, one crawling toward the exit leaving a trail of blood. Judah waved desperately. This way. Back door. Back door. Before they reached it, a section of the upper hallway collapsed. Floorboards rained down like shrapnel. Silas shielded his face. Amara ducked. Harrow screamed. Light streamed through the new hole in the ceiling as shingles split apart from the roof. Cold morning air flooded the house. We'll be buried alive, Silas muttered. No, Amara said. Not if we follow the path that does not break. What path? Silas demanded. She pointed. Not toward the back door. Not toward the side hall. Toward the kitchen corridor, dark, narrow, half-collapsed. That hall. Silas stared. It's the weakest part of the house. It is the oldest, she corrected. Built on ground that knows truth. Follow me. Before Silas could protest, she moved. He followed her. Judah came after him. Harrow hesitated, then ran after them in terror. The kitchen corridor was dim, lit only by a narrow window where snow drifted in through a cracked pane. Pots hung crooked from hooks. The stone floor was uneven, trembling beneath their steps. Silas grabbed Amara's shoulder. Explain how you know where to go. What is this place? What's beneath it? Amara touched the wall gently, almost with reverence. This wing was built over a cellar where people once prayed. Prayed? Judah whispered. Not for mercy, she said softly. For strength to endure. Silas felt a chill crawl up his spine. You mean enslaved people? Yes, she said. They gathered here in secret. They whispered their names so the land would never forget them. The earth beneath this corridor holds their voices. It will not betray us. A beam crashed behind them, sealing the hall. There was no turning back now. Harrow panted as he ran. This is madness, following superstition while the house collapses. A piece of ceiling fell inches from him, cutting off his complaint. They reached the end of the corridor just as the pantry wall groaned and split outward with a deafening crack. Judah screamed. Silas stumbled back. But Amara reached into the falling dust and debris, pulled aside a broken shelf and revealed a door. An old one, nearly forgotten. Hidden behind a century of shelves and flour sacks. What is that? Silas whispered. A slave exit, Amara said. Built long before you were born. A way for the chain to escape when overseers grew cruel. Silas stared at her. How do you know that? The house told me. Before he could question her further, the floor behind them shook violently. A massive crack tore through the corridor, swallowing half the room they had just crossed. Harrow pointed at the door. Open it. Silas grabbed the rusted handle. With Judah's help, he forced it free with splintering. A cold gust of wind blew in, carrying the scent of pine and wet leaves. Outside lay a narrow slope leading down toward the old sugar storehouse. Snow coated the path. Dawn barely brushed the sky. Silas pushed Judah out first. Go. Judah scrambled out. Amara followed, stepping barefoot into the snow, unharmed by the cold. Silas grabbed Harrow by the collar when the man panicked and froze. Move, damn you. Harrow stumbled through the doorway. Silas followed. And the house gave one final, thunderous roar. The entire left wing of Pembroke Plantation collapsed inward, sending up a cloud of dust and splintered timber. The roof caved. The beams snapped. Windows shattered into glittering shards. Silas was thrown forward, tumbling through snow and mud until he rolled onto his back, coughing, gasping for air. When the dust cleared, half the plantation was gone. A smoking ruin. Amara stood at the edge of the destruction, her cloak whipped by the wind, her expression unreadable. Judah stared at the wreckage in horror. Sir, you're home. Silas sat up, chest burning. Homes can be rebuilt. He turned to Amara. But tell me now, why did the land react to you? Why did it shake like that? Amara looked toward the broken foundation, where a thin curl of smoke still rose. Because below that house, she said, lies the circle that made me. Silas froze. You mean the men? No, she interrupted. The place, the chamber. The stone floor where they carved into skin and called it enlightenment. Harrow clutched his medical bag, trembling. It still exists? Amara nodded. Buried but not dead. Silas swallowed hard. Then the fires they set. Only burned the house above it, she said. Not the chamber. Not the truth. Silas stared into her eyes, and for the first time he understood. This wasn't just a woman running from tormentors. This was a woman carrying the memory of an entire system's sins, etched into her flesh. And those men were not finished. Not even close. Amara looked north toward the rising sun. They will come again, she said. But next time, they will not come for me. Silas's voice tightened. Then for who? She turned to him slowly. For you. Snow drifted softly through the air, settling over the ruined remains of Pembroke Plantation like a shroud. The sun had begun to rise, casting a thin wash of pale gold across the shattered beams and collapsed walls. What had once been a grand estate now resembled a graveyard, silent, broken, and heavy with secrets clawing their way back into the world. Judah wrapped his coat tightly around himself, staring at the smoking rubble. Sir, what are we gonna do? This ain't just damage. This house is done. Silas didn't answer at first. He stood at the edge of the destruction, chest aching, shoulder throbbing, mind struggling to make sense of everything that had happened in the last few hours. It fell too fast, he murmured. No fire spreads that quickly. No foundation collapses in minutes. We saw what caused it, Judah whispered. It wasn't just fire or tremors. It was something else. Silas turned. Amara stood a few paces away, bare feet in the snow, the tattered cloak clinging to her shoulders. She faced the ruins with a stillness that was almost reverence. This place held more than wood and brick, she said. It held memory, chains, blood. Harrow staggered forward, eyes wide, hair dusted with ash. Memory does not make a house collapse, he spat. You did something. The marks did something. They reacted. Amara cut her gaze toward him, and he fell silent. The marks do nothing, she said. They only remember what was done. Silas approached her slowly. You said the chamber is still there. Yes. And the men, your tormentors, will come again. She nodded. They lost their leader tonight. They lost soldiers. They lost the house they tried to bury. They will return to silence you, Silas. And anyone who protected me. Silas felt a cold knot tighten in his stomach. Then we must leave. All of us. Harrow shook his head violently. No, you do not understand. If the circle discovers I failed to deliver her, they will come for me too. Silas shot him a cold look. You betrayed them the moment you walked into my home. I went for research. Harrow snapped. For scientific progress. You went, Amara said softly, because cruelty makes you feel powerful. Harrow's face drained. Silas exhaled, chest heavy with exhaustion. We cannot stay here. Judah, gather what you can from the stables. Food, blankets, tools. Judah hesitated. Sir, where are we going? Silas didn't know how to answer. He looked out across his land, fields covered in frost, fences broken, the old sugar storehouse leaning with age. It struck him that everything he had built, everything he had inherited, everything he had tried to reform cautiously, quietly, had been swept away in a single night. A night that began with a purchase he barely understood. North, Silas finally said. We'll head north toward the river crossings. Amara turned to him. They will follow. The circle has eyes on every road. Then help me, Silas said. Tell me how to stay ahead of them. Her expression softened slightly. The land will guide us if we listen. Harrow forced a brittle laugh. Land? The land is soaked in death and superstition. It is soil and rock, nothing more. Amara walked to him slowly. Harrow, she said, the land swallowed your leader today. You heard his scream. The doctor paled. Judah returned with a pair of blankets and a satchel. Sir, we gotta move. Silas nodded, turning toward the woods. We take the old servant trail behind the sugar house. It'll bring us to the marsh path. Few patrols go through there. As they made their way toward the tree line, Silas glanced back one last time at the ruins of his home. Smoke still curled from the wreckage. A charred portrait lay half buried in rubble, Elizabeth's portrait, his late wife. Her painted eyes stared up through cracked varnish. Silas bent and lifted the frame gently. Judah murmured, Sir, we don't have time. I know. Silas pressed the portrait to his chest. But I'm not leaving her here. Amara stepped beside him, her voice a soft murmur. You carry grief the way some men carry blades. Silas swallowed, unable to speak. They continued toward the woods. As they walked, Harrow limped behind them, muttering to himself. We need shelter. Tools. A place to hide until we can reason with them. Yes. Surely there is a way to negotiate to prove that she is too dangerous to pursue. Amara turned her head slightly. They will not negotiate. You know that. Harrow stiffened. They will if I offer them what they want. Silas stopped walking. And what is that? The knowledge, Harrow whispered. The research. My notes. Everything I recorded about her resilience. Her scars. Her responses. They will spare me if I provide it. Amara stepped forward, voice low. Your notes help them continue their horrors. It is survival. Harrow snapped. You cannot ask me to die for what is right, she finished for him. Harrow's lip trembled with anger and fear. I'm not like them. I only observed. You observed suffering, Amara said, and called it curiosity. Silas grabbed Harrow's arm. You want survival? Then stay close and shut your mouth. Harrow said nothing more. They moved deeper into the woods, branches scraping their coats, snow crunching softly underfoot. The rising sun painted the horizon in bruised shades of purple and blue. The wind carried the distant sound of dogs. A warning. Amara paused. They are coming, she whispered. But not for me. Silas's heart slammed against his ribs. You said that earlier. Why would they come for me? She looked at him with a sadness that felt older than the scars on her back. Because, she said, you were the first man to defy them without fear. The circle does not forgive defiance. Silas clenched his jaw. Then they will have to kill me. Amara shook her head. They wish for worse. They wish to break you. Judah shivered. Sir, we gotta hurry. Silas nodded, gripping Elizabeth's portrait tighter. They pressed onward. But as they vanished into the trees, none of them noticed the figure watching from the ridge above, the one rider who had survived the earlier attack. His coat torn, his face pale, his eyes tracking their every movement. He lifted a horn to his lips and blew. A low, haunting note rolled across the winter fields. A summons, a signal, a promise. The hunt had begun. The horn's cry rolled through the forest like a wounded animal. It carried across frozen branches, through hollow trunks, down winding riverbeds. Every creature within earshot froze at the sound. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Silas stopped in his tracks. What was that? Amara lifted her chin slightly. A summons. The circle has called every loyal hound. Judah trembled. Lord help us, they coming now? Amara nodded once. Yes. Silas scanned the trees. Then we need to move faster. But the forest had begun to change. Branches overhead creaked not from wind but from weight, something moving, shifting. Snow fell in strange, patterned flurries. The ground beneath their feet felt thinner, looser, as if the soil itself strained under a buried memory. Harrow limped behind them, clutching his medical bag. We need to hide. We must disappear. If they see us, they'll tear us apart. They won't tear you apart, Silas said coldly. They'll use you. Amara glanced toward him. He is right to be afraid. The horn calls not just men, but the ones who serve them in shadows. Judah whispered, What kind of men serve in shadows? Amara answered softly, The kind who once stood around a stone table and watched me scream. Silas felt nausea rise in his throat. He pushed them onward through the trees. But the further they went, the more the forest seemed to close in around them, not out of hostility but out of choice. Branches bent inward. Roots twisted across the path behind them, covering their tracks. The forest itself was shifting, subtly, protectively. Amara, Silas called ahead, Is this you? She touched her fingers to the trunk of a massive oak. No, it is the land again. It knows what hunts us. Judah's eyes widened. You mean, it's helping us? Amara nodded. For now. Behind them, the horn blew again, closer, followed by the sound of hooves. They're on horseback, Silas hissed. We have minutes. The trees thinned ahead, revealing a clearing. In the center stood the old Pembroke sugar storehouse, leaning, rotted, long abandoned. Its broken windows gaped like empty eyes, its roof sagging under decades of snow. Judah groaned. Sir, not in there. That place ain't safe. Roof ready to fall. Better than the open, Silas said. They hurried across the clearing, pushing through the swollen wooden door. The storehouse smelled of mold, dust, and old sweetness. Sunlight filtered through holes in the roof, falling across rusted iron kettles and broken barrels. Silas whispered, Hide quietly. Judah ducked behind a collapsed beam. Harrow curled himself behind a barrel, trembling violently. Silas crouched near the far wall. Amara stood in the center of the room. Hide, Silas hissed. They'll see you. They are not coming for me first, she whispered. Outside, the hoofbeats grew louder. Then, silence. Not emptiness, waiting. No one breathed. Snow crunched outside the door. Then a voice, familiar, cold. "I know you're in there, Pembroke." Silas stiffened. A shadow darkened the doorway. The surviving rider from the earlier attack stepped inside. His coat was torn, his face bruised, but his eyes gleamed with fury and purpose. Behind him, 6 more men formed a half-circle around the storehouse. The rider spat blood onto the floor. "You killed our leader. You cost us the chamber. You cost us men. You think you'll run?" Silas rose slowly. "I didn't kill anyone. Your own sins brought the house down." "Liar," the man snarled. Amara stepped forward. "You want him," she said. "Then take me first." The rider barked a bitter laugh. "Oh, we'll take you. But you ain't the prize." He pointed at Silas. "He is." Silas blinked, stunned. "Me? Why me?" The rider's voice softened into something more sinister. "Because the circle doesn't make many mistakes. But when it does, it fixes them." Harrow whispered from his hiding place, "Silas, he means they want to break you. They want to punish you for interfering." The rider nodded. "You put your hands between us and our property. You failed to give her over. You humiliated us. And worst of all, you tried to defend her." His lips curled. "So we'll start with your bones." Judah burst out, voice shaking with rage. "You ain't touching him." The rider didn't even turn. He fired. Judah cried out and fell back against the wall, clutching his leg as blood soaked through his trousers. "No." Silas lunged toward him. The rider aimed again. But Amara moved first. She crossed the distance between them in a single blur, faster than human reflex, faster than any man could track. She grabbed the pistol, twisting his arm until bones snapped with a terrible crunch. The rider screamed. Silas dragged Judah behind a beam. "Stay with me. Judah, stay." Amara threw the rider against the far wall so hard the boards cracked. He slumped, gasping. Outside, the other men surged forward. "She's inside. Get the girl. Kill Pembroke." Amara stood in the doorway, blocking their path. "You want me," she said. "But you do not understand what I have become." They raised their guns. Fire. Gunshots exploded. Boards splintered. Glass shattered. Dust filled the air. When the smoke cleared, Amara was still standing. Not unharmed, but standing. The bullets lay scattered around her feet, flattened. The men outside recoiled in terror. "What is she?" "No woman survives that." She's. Amara didn't let them finish. She stepped forward into the morning light. Her voice was quiet. "You carved symbols into my back to mark me as yours. But the marks changed." The men stumbled backward. "They did not become yours," she said. "They became my shield against you." Then she raised her hands. And the ground beneath the riders' horses trembled. Snow lifted in spirals. The trees groaned. Silas felt the air tighten like a held breath. The men screamed. "It's her, she's doing it. Run. Run, run, run." But it was too late. The forest answered her. And the circle's hunters suffered the fate of every predator who forgets that prey can learn to bite back. What do you think really happened in those woods? Was Amara a survivor shaped by cruelty? Or something the men who created her could never control? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you want more dark historical mysteries that blur the line between truth and terror, subscribe to Chronicles of Shadows, hit the notification bell, and share this story with someone who loves forgotten secrets buried in America's past. These stories must be remembered. These voices must be heard. See you in the next one.